Recent research out of Meetings Outlook in partnership with MGM Resorts International shows us that 54.9% of respondents described contract negotiations as seemingly more complex. And on this edition of MPItv, we're speaking with Darlene Kelly Stewart, a third-party meeting planner, about her experience on how contract negotiations have changed over the years. Darlene, thank you for joining us. If you can speak to how contract negotiations have become more complex.
Contract negotiations have become more complex because there are more things to consider. When you're doing a contract, there are deeper penalties if you're not performing to your contract for room attrition or food and beverage attrition. So when you're doing your contract, you really have to think ahead to what you will be doing at that event versus what you've always done at that event. Hotels are getting more particular about their average rates and their RevPAR and things of that nature. So there are a lot of other factors influencing contracting versus just a conference wanting rooms and meeting space. I also feel that contracts sometimes aren't very balanced. They do tend to favor the writer, which is typically the hotel or the venue, and not so much consider the client's perspective or what their requirements are in a contract.
Now, of course, part of the complexities come from disruptors like Airbnb coming into the industry, where attendees are now looking for rooms to stay at other locations outside of hotels. How does this add to the challenges of negotiations as a planner?
The complexity comes with time. If you have a conference of a certain size, you need to negotiate that space 3, 4, 5 years in advance, depending on how complex your meeting is. You don't have a crystal ball, and even if you did, now it would be so cracked it wouldn't work. My advice to planners and what I do for my clients is I try to consider both sides of the contract. For my clients, I always try and make a contract more balanced, formative, and clearer so that both sides are in a win-win situation when it comes to the details and clauses in a contract. So moving forward, I would hope that hotels or venue would be open to having a clause in their contract similar to a rate accelerator clause, where when you're booking that far in advance, they typically put in a rate clause that rates will go up a certain percentage. Balance is really a requirement in a contract now.
So it's about finding that perfect balance and working in partnership with hoteliers. And of course, this wouldn't be a balanced story without hearing from a hotelier. So joining us now is Michael Dominguez with MGM Resorts International. And Michael, 22.8% of respondents said that contract negotiations focus on very different issues. Can you speak to some of those trends that we're seeing and how they're adding to the complexities of negotiating contracts?
6 months ago, we weren't talking about GDPR. And now it is a discussion point, and it's not just the issue of GDPR. It is a regulation that now has impact abroad to our entire audience, and it is new for contract language. So as we started to have to experience this literally 4 to 5 months ago, we, with our partner community and our planner community, we were having to hand in hand trying to figure out what is this going to look like from a legal perspective. That is a really simple example of how quickly something changes in either regulation or in a legal capacity or within a political situation that has an impact to us. Every aspect of life actually becomes part of our travel and meetings world, and that's where the complexity comes from, because life is changing every day.
So being that we're in a seller's market, what advice do you have for planners to ensure that they really are getting a balanced contract when they're negotiating?
And the economics are simply supply and demand. So we're in a record demand period with no new supply. That's what's creating pricing power for hotels, and that's what's creating a lack of availability. I stress that because as an industry, we still talk about seller's market and buyer's market versus the market. The market is simply based on supply and demand. And for planners to understand that don't have strong negotiating skills, it will make them better negotiators, because your best negotiators come from a position of strength. You also need to know, one, are you coming from an area of strength? And two, what are you going to leverage in the negotiation? And what I found is that many of the people don't have enough of an understanding, and it's why I talk so much in the industry on this. They don't have enough understanding of what they're leveraging and what has leverage and what doesn't. I think what's most important is for planners to be well educated on what the market conditions are so they can educate their stakeholders. For a planner that might not know where to start, it's why they should be at a World Education Congress or MPI. It's why they should be at the meetings for MPI, because this is the training that we're trying to deliver to talk about basic, today, relevant market conditions. That's why MPI is so valuable.
Darlene and Michael, thank you so much for your input and for joining us on this edition of MPI TV. You can learn even more about the research from Meetings Outlook in the August issue of The Meeting Professional.